Over the years, I've had many discussions about how to format your Mac script to be able to write tools. There's of course there's also a lot of tools being written now in Python, but this is specifically MaxScript and how I structure code within my MaxScript. I have a demo one that I'm going to show you here and break down as we go, but here's the reason why I do that. This is a master rigging tool that I have that essentially gives me access to many of the scripts that I use on a daily basis. The reason this functions the way it does is because of the way I structure all of the code and how I sort of unified how I've written things. What this tool does, it actually allows me to be able to select any given script that is currently being used, and it loads it or wants to be used, and it loads it into a new interface here. So instead of launching separate dialogues constantly, what this does, it allows me to launch all of my tools into one dialogue, so I don't have 1,000 little dialogues floating all over the place all the time. It cleans things up. It makes it easier for me to, manage everything. And it also makes it very easy for me to develop the next set of tools and to update them because every single time I click on it in the list, it actually evaluates the script and then launches it. So as I make changes to the script, all I got to do is click on it again and I get all the new tools. This makes it really easy. Also, I don't have to have these scripts installed in Max. Only this outer tool is installed in Max. And effectively then all of these tools are this what you're looking at down the left hand side is a location on my hard drive where all of my scripts are stored. So they're not even stored inside of Max. It just means that I can do things much easier and much more quickly, only having to install one script and then accessing all the others through it. It also gives me the ability to do things like right click on them and edit the script. And there's the script that actually is being called there. And that's the tool that is being loaded in this place. I can run them, I can delete them, I can show the script headers, so I can actually get information about the scripts and everything. So how do I format my scripts to be able to do that? Well, here's a quick breakdown, and then I'll write this out with you. I have a very first line is there strictly as a try catch for when I'm testing to make sure that every time I evaluate, it actually clears the old tool and I get a new one. So I'll explain that as we move on. I use structures for all my tools. So everything is inside of a struct. Now, effectively, a rollout is just a structure as well, and you can do everything inside of a rollout the same way. But I kind of find this is a better methodology to follow. I always have a variable called version string inside of my struct tool that I just version up and down to give the version number inside of my tool. You could also do that with numbers in the actual file name and then go ahead and pull that information out of the file that's been run. It's another way to do it, and I do that in some cases as well. But we're going to go with this one. So this is always called version str, always. I don't change the name of this ever is what it boils down to. The other one that I always have is UI inst. This is an instance of the user interface. You're going to see where that comes into play in a minute. I then list all sorts of functions that I need. So this is all the bread and butter of the tool. This is what this tool does is this list of functions that would go in here. So anything the tool's going to do, they reside in this location inside here. And again, you're going to see how that is going to become very handy to be able to do things and be able to reuse code and whatnot and be able to tie other scripts together. The next section is my user interface, and my user interface can be one or many rollouts effectively. Okay, so I would have different functions for each rollout, and if that's the case, I may have sub rollouts in the main one, and that main one would then load all of the sub rollouts into it. Okay. And in this case, right now, I've just thrown a list box and some local variable and a local function inside of the rollout. And anytime I put a function inside of a rollout and not outside of it directly in the struct is because this is very specific to this rollout. this isn't sort of bread and butter of the tool. This is bread and butter of simply updating the UI in this case, update UI. It updates that it'll update this list box when you select something new, for instance, or something of that case. Or when I hit the button, it has to go and force the list box to update. So I'll have this generalized function here. Then, of course, event handlers for any of the UI items that need to get called. So back outside of my UI rollouts, going down further, I have a couple more that are necessary for make all this work. One is get rollouts. And what get rollouts does is it simply goes and gets any of the functions that are that contain a rollout. It evaluates it. And of course, at the end, it automatically returns the final thing. So in this case, it's going to be returning the rollout. And so if you can see, I'm calling the UI, the function called UI. And so what this is going to return to me is an array of rollouts. So I would then call, another rollout, and I'd call them in order in here so that I could get an array back. And again, that's how this tool functions. When it evaluates this script, the next thing this does is it calls the get rollouts function inside of any one of these scripts. It gets an array of the rollouts, and then it goes and populates this right-hand panel, which is a sub rollout with all of the rollouts that it put together from the tool that it called. So I can actually run inside of another script completely all of the functionality that exists in this script. And that's the beauty of this system that I have going here. The run function is for launching the script. This run function goes ahead and opens and closes the UI in its own unique dialog, and we'll show that in a minute. And then the last one is I write the macro scripts for the tools right into the script itself. You could create these as a separate macro script file. Sometimes that's a better idea because what's going to happen with this one is when this evaluates, when the script evaluates, it's going to create this macro script and it's going to put it in the user macros folder for you. Only problem here is they're all separate scripts. Now, I don't mind that because I find it easier to manage the macro scripts right in this one tool. I can make changes to it here as I'm updating this, and it keeps it all nice and tidy and neat. But in some cases, you might want all your macro scripts in one script. And in that case, you'd have to write a separate macro scripts script and put all of the macro script definitions in it. And again, that's something I do in certain cases, especially for clients and whatnot. I'll do that sort of thing. Last couple lines, this bottom one is not necessary, but we're going to keep it there for testing purposes and making an instance of the structure. So I'm just going to run this just so you see what happens. It pops open the dialog box because it evaluates everything and it runs the run command that's run here. If I run it again, the first thing that happens is it's going to do this try catch, and it's going to kill the dialog for us. So I'm going to eval this again, and you'll see it closes it. But what's also nice is if I go into my tool.run and evaluate that, you'll see it actually closes it now. Okay. And if I run it again, it opens it. So it's actually become a toggle for the tool to toggle it open and closed. And that's what the macro is calling, is it's calling this mytool.run, and it's calling this function here, which is an automatic toggle for the script. So how have I gone about writing some of this? So let's just take a look at a quick breakdown. I'll just say new, and I'm going to do a struct. I'm going to call it the tool this time. Of course, it should be something useful, is what it boils down to. Open close parentheses, and inside of this, I'm going to go version str equals, and I do it as a string in here, and so this is going to be my beta version. Oops, didn't need that. And everything inside of a struct has to be separated with commas. So we'll separate that out, and then we'll go UI inst equals undefined. okay, and comma. And then we'd have functions that are going to get called. I'm not going to bother with those. I'm going to create the function for the UI. Um, and This function for the UI is going to create a rollout. Uh, and we're going to call it the role. And again, one of the things I always tend to try and do is uh, add in the version strings here. So I can see which version it is as it's opening. Okay, so with that, I have a spinner. I always suffix my spinners and or UI items with just a 2-letter identification. So if I see the variable later in the code, I know what it is. Often people do that by prefixing if they've got sort of variables of different types, whatever. It's a good habit to get into, is what it boils down to. And this is what I've just sort of always done in MaxScript. So I've continued it in MaxScript. So it's the same as all my other code. Um, there's a test spinner. So comma separate my function, and then I have the run function. And the run function is going to do this. So when I call the run function, it's going to go in and get the UI, and it's going to make this UI inst equal to it. So it's going to ask the question first is if UI inst is equal to undefined, then, and an else. So if it's undefined, then we can go ahead and launch it. And so what we want to do then is we want to take the UI inst and we want to make it equal to the UI function. So that's going to return a rollout. Okay, so UI inst is going to become equal to that rollout. And then we want to do create dialog UI inst and launch the dialog. If the dialog already exists, we want to be able to toggle it closed. So in that case, we're going to use the destroy dialog, and we're going to destroy UI inst. And then we're going to go ahead and set UI inst to be equal to undefined again, so that we know the next time the run function runs, it says, hey, it's undefined, go ahead and launch it. So this tool now is already well on its way. The next thing you need to do in this case is you need to make an instance, and there are cases, and we're going to show where that case is that's going to happen here. We're going to need to make an instance of the tool. So you can just overwrite the structure effectively in this case to run this. So let's just eval, see if I have any errors. No, no errors. Everything ran fine. I'll just clear the listener so we can see it. But now what we're going to do is we're going to take the tool, and you can see it's a structure, and it has functions and everything. We're going to say dot run, and we're going to run this. And true, there is our rollout. So now one of the things that I didn't put in my demo, I just realized, is if we close it here and we run the run again, it won't open. And then it'll have to run again. And the reason being there is when we close it at the rollout, we're not setting UI inst to be undefined. So here's how that's done. On the roll, I think it's closed do or close do, I think it is. Let's see if I'm right or wrong. And we'll just go print closing, just so we know if we're right or wrong. And so when this closes, then what we want to do is we want to set this UI inst to be equal to undefined, so we know that it closed. So we're just going to go and say, well, let's go ahead and set that to UI inst undefined. And I want to evaluate, and we're going to run the run and open it, and it's going to look great. I'm going to hit close, and we're going to get an error. Struct member access requires instance UI inst. So I said UI inst, and we went to close it. So this rollout, when it gets launched by the create dialog, ends up outside of the scope of the tool. So it's sort of like it's running outside of it. So to be able to call anything inside of the tool, okay, directly inside of it, we need to be able to call into that. And that is our instance that we created. And we're going to say the tool.ui inst. So we're calling into the tool and setting UI inst. So if I evaluate this again and just run it and now close that, close is all good, set closing on us. If I run it again now, it'll automatically open it. If I use the run, it'll close it. If I use the run, it'll open it, and everything works as it should now. So this idea of calling into the structure is going to happen if we need to do some sort of major function here that is going to be sort of the bread and butter. Do some stuff. So this is what this and a set of other functions is what this whole tool is about. These are the functions that actually do the work when you hit a button that says go ahead and do it or whatever. And so do some stuff. We're just going to do a print statement in here. We're not going to get fancy. Okay. Although I guess we could, yeah, I would just leave it like that. So I'm going to create a button here. Do stuff BT. Do stuff. And of course, we need the event handler for that. And we're going to go and throw that in here on do stuff BT pressed do. And for those of you who are new to MaxScript, it isn't case sensitive. You could have typed this like this, unlike every other language out there. My strong suggestion is you always keep things case sensitive and so that things look right. And so we're going to when this gets pushed, we're going to go and call this. So let's make it error again. Hey, I just go and make it just call it, of course. I run my function and I hit do stuff and oh, it actually worked this time. I'm not quite sure why it did. I'm not 100% certain why that didn't throw an error, but it probably will at some point. But you need to do this, okay? The tool dot do some stuff. That was really weird that it didn't cause an error. But always do this, okay? Because it's something. This has got to be in memory right now or something. I'm not sure why. Um, so we call back into the structure, we call the function that we're going to work on passing any variables or whatever. What's nice about this scenario now is that, we can go ahead and we can get the rollouts. So if we stick the function get rollouts, and I always call it that, so it's always exactly the same. It always just returns an array of rollouts. And again, this is going to be UI, and it's going to return the UI. So I don't need to save that. Just have it. The tool.get rollouts will return an array of the rollouts. So you can see it's returning the rollout down here. Okay. So this is always there. My run function's always there. And what's nice is I can actually call, if this is the bread and butter, sort of the, one of the main functions that this tool runs, I can also go the tool do some stuff. Oops. Dot delete do some stuff. And so that's a function there. And again, if I go and call it, it's actually writing that out. So I can actually make calls to this tool now that it's in memory without actually even having the rollout open. I don't even need to have this tool open and running on screen to be able to utilize the functions that it is able to be called. So this is why I write everything this way. And again, I stick for testing purposes, I stick the try. This is probably why, maybe part of the reason I was messing with things. No, it couldn't have been. I always do a try catch, and I just make sure that I close any dialogues or set the UI inst to be equal undefined. So problem is this will I would have to probably do a couple lines where I'd say try close the dialog if it exists, and then set UINs to be equal to undefined. So there is the basic premise of why I go down this road. It's cleaner, it's neater. It looks like it's way more work for a simple tool like this, but once you end up like me and you literally have thousands of scripts you've written over, near 30 years of coding, you need some way to organize those sorts of things and keeping yourself sane, I guess, really. There you go. Thanks a lot.